everybody. Welcome to Gibbsboro Methodist Church. This is the first day of Advent. Isn't that exciting? Yes. Happy New Year. Did you know that that's what starts the church year? This is when you start Advent, that's the new year for church. So what are your resolutions? No one's giving you any. All right. You didn't even know it was a new year. You don't even care. All right. Well, that's the way the church sets up the year. So today as we worship, that's in front of us. This first day of Advent, we celebrate the coming of God to us. And so as we begin, we're going to have a word of prayer, which I think should be on the screen. Let's see. So if you can say this prayer along with me as we begin our worship service today. And why don't you stand if you're able, and we can join together. O God, you so loved the world as to give your only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Grant to us the precious gift of faith, that we may know that the Son of God is come, and may have power to overcome the world, and gain a blessed immortality. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Remain standing. We're going to sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing.
Good morning. I was glad when they said to me, "Let us go up to the house of the Lord."
We are glad whether we drove in or climbed up, whether we logged on or tuned in. We are glad to be here in this community with this family. It is a place of joyful hope, of radical welcome. It is a place where together we can wait in wondrous anticipation of the kingdom to come.
Many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. that God may teach us God's ways, and that we may walk in God's paths.
We light this candle as a sign of our hope, our joyous hope that we can be restored, our faith restored, our strength restored, our confidence restored, our joy restored, as we watch and wait with all God's people for the promise to be fulfilled.
Now the response to that is, "Come, O come, Lord Jesus." So I wonder if you could say that together. Come, O come, Lord Jesus. I'll have to get that on this line. Let's sing, "O come, all you faithful." And we're going to sing 3 verses from this. Psalm 122 is our psalm for today. It says, "I was glad when they said to me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord.' Our feet are standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem, built as a city that is bound firmly together. To it the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, as was decreed for Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Lord. For there the thrones for judgment were set up, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. Peace be within your walls and security within your towers. For the sake of my relatives and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good." This is going in and out, so I'm going to do a quick microphone change, and hopefully that will help. Hold on a second. this passage from Matthew 24, I'm going to stop as we go through it. And so as we're going through the passage, I'm going to remark in little pieces. Because this one is a bizarre one. Matthew 24 is in the little apocalypse. And when we are in Advent, we're celebrating the coming of Christ. But with the church, we celebrate the second coming, the anticipation, the expectation of the Lord's return. And so these are the passages that we kind of deal with. And let's see how we do. But about that day and hour, no one knows. Neither the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. I remember running into people in New York in 2012 that told me Jesus was coming back on October 26th, 2012. And I said to the person I talked with, I said, well, what are you going to do on the 27th? And they didn't know what to do with that. And I said, well, no one knows the day and the hour. What do you think Jesus means when Jesus says the day? What kind of day is it? Let's keep reading it. Maybe you'll figure this out. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days, before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. So what kind of day is it? This is the audience participation portion of the message. And so when you have an answer, just shout it out. So otherwise we'll be here till what? It looks like a day of judgment, doesn't it? That's the day. So when the prophets used that term in the Old Testament, the day, they meant the day of God's judgment, the day of God's arrival. Verse 40, then two will be in the field. One will be taken and one will be left. Two women will be grinding meal together. One will be taken and one will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. Okay, let's see what you do with this little slide. What are some of the questions you have, and what are some of the observations that you make? It's talking about the rapture in some respects. So we read this passage through the lens of another one, which is 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. When those who are dead in Christ will meet him in the air. Right? This is kind of what we think we read that. But what are some of the things in here that you don't know? Which one's taken? Which one stays? What other questions are here? Who's coming? Right? When is the big question too? Parishioners calling me during worship service. That's a good one. I'm a little busy right now at the moment. I can take your call, but then it would be all over. Which is better? To be taken or to be left? Wait, which one is better? Well, I don't read it that way at all. Now, when you read it within the lens of 1 Thessalonians 4, then you think taken is better. But Jesus doesn't say that here. He just says one will be taken, one will be left. Now, if you're looking at this through the lens of God's wrath, to be taken is no good. What happens with prisoners of war? Are they taken or are they left? Prisoners of war are taken. We read that, in other words, as if God's going to take people out, and then the judgment will come. But there is nothing in the text that indicates that. So that's a whole other question. Who's taken? Who's left? Which is better? You don't even know which one is better. Which one is better than the other? Jesus never says. His only comment is, so I was preaching this, a little word of warning here, at Blackwood, and during the message, person right on the front row, I mean on the front row, right, it's like this. No, that's clear, right? There's only one person to blame for that. Her. No, that's me. I'm not that interesting. So she falls asleep, right? So that was funny. You got to keep awake. You got to keep alert, right? That's the. So we want to show all the questions that the passage opens up, and then we want to come back and circle around. And we want to say, okay, what are the things that are certain? What do we know about the passage? I think there's one more slide for a couple more verses that'll have us thoroughly confused. So, but understand this. This is Jesus. He continues to teach. Understand this. If the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would have not let his house be broken into. Now think about that for a second. That's obvious. That's obvious. Now, if we were really going to live by this, if we were really going to live by that verse 43, how in the world would anybody get any sleep? Right? Are you with me, or did I lose you the last two verses ago? Are you still with me? Okay. In other words, you do not know, you will not know, but you must stay alert as much as you can. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Unexpected. And that is we're looking at great expectations through Advent. And the point that we're going to start with today is that Jesus is forever unannounced. He just shows up. And as much, we keep getting phone calls from them. I'll have to get those later. As often as we expect Jesus to show up at times of our own choosing, Jesus says, that's not the way it works. Now, I always poke fun at the folks in New York who lined up the buses and were telling everybody that the world was going to end. I remember talking to Joan Walsh about this. She knew of the guy. His name was Brother Camping. I'd never heard of him before. Harold Camping. He did all the math. He knows when Jesus is coming back. And I'm like, I didn't know there would be a math problem when I started in ministry. Had I known there would be math, maybe I would have picked something else. She said, no, he did all the math. And so when I talked to the person about when Jesus was coming back, and they said on October 27th, this is what I said to the person that I was talking about. That's something. She said, yes. Are you ready? I said, well, I have to be honest. Certainly I'm ready, but as a pastor, I would have liked to have told my congregation last Sunday, had this been working out. Oh, yes, she said. Anyway, we went on like that for a little while, and how do you ever know people that they're convinced that this is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen, then what do you do? Well, what we know about the passage is the one central point. Be aware. Be awake and be alert, for you don't know when Jesus is going to show up. You just don't know. As difficult as that is, we also have some things that we can say about the way Jesus shows up, and that is, he's always unannounced. He comes in different ways, and it's all a mystery of God's grace. As often as we want to take it and put it down into say these magic words, you can conjure God's presence about as easy as you can corral a cat. And at that point, I guess I should tell you that our cat discovered the Christmas tree and has made a careful study of both of the Christmas trees from bottom to top. and then back down again, so the branches are already leaning in one direction. Have you ever tried to corral a cat? They're tough, and cat wrangling is not for the faint of heart. It's difficult. I got scratch marks to prove it too. Sometimes we think that we can corral the presence of God, that we can take and navigate the presence of God in just the same way. That people have words that they'll repeat, and that those words gain admission. That's not how Jesus works. Jesus comes unannounced. Now, the whole notion of the rapture is, I want to tell you, I'm not uninformed about this, okay? I'm not uninformed. I know where I speak. If we were going to start talking about the rapture, I promise you, I can find about 40 different versions for 40 different flavors. So before we take and determine we're going to plant our feet on this one way it has to work, let me just say that up front. People have been spinning things out about this since the passage was written. There is no question about that. There is no question about this. Jesus encourages us to stay awake and alert, to notice when the Lord's going to show up. God's going to come, and God will come in judgment, and God will come in mercy, and Jesus invites us to be awake for the arrival. Romans 13 has something interesting to say about how we stay awake. I'm going to read that. I'm reading kind of slow, let it sink in. Romans 13, beginning in verse 8, it says this: "Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as yourself." Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. Before I go to verse 11, let me just say this about when we talk about rapture and judgment and all that stuff. I know a lot of Christians who are great fans of Judgment Day and rapture, with all kinds of theories about who gets rescued and who doesn't. And what I want to say is, and say it gently, because I probably have a mixed crowd with that opinion, is this: if love is your aim, then judgment is the worst possible scenario for anyone. Therefore, the believer cannot hope for judgment for anyone. So just let that settle for a moment. That if we love one another deeply from the heart with the love of God, then God's judgment day for us as well as for the ones on the other side can only be a disaster. So we must pray that when God's judgment comes, we are all found in the right state somehow. Now watch what Paul says, because here's where we're going to intersect with Jesus. He says this word, verse 11: "Besides this," love your neighbor as yourself. "Besides this, you know what time it is, how it is now the moment for you to wake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. The night is far gone, the day is near. Let us then lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us live honorably as in the day, not in reveling and drunkenness, not in debauchery and licentiousness, not in quarreling and jealousy. Instead, put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. Live in the light of the day. Live within the context of the lights are on and things are good. Because God comes to us. God comes unannounced. And we've got to be ready. And if we're awake, we'll be able to perceive where God is. Now, I don't like that we've got two passages that say God shows up like a thief in the night. That's a bummer. So am I the only one that had their house burglarized when we were kids? Somebody came in. My mom always joked with us too. She'd say, well, if somebody's going to burglarize our house, they're going to feel so bad, they're going to bring stuff in. That's what she always said. Which is, but that's no fun because you feel like somebody's in your space. Somebody's come in and unexpected, unannounced, and then left. And you only find the remnant, the trace of the absence of the thing that they took. Several years ago, at Blackwood Church, we had candlelight service. And at the candlelight service on Christmas Eve, we returned to our cars to find that someone had rifled through all our cars in the parking lot. So I mean, what are they going to take out of my car? They took about probably 83 cents from the middle console, which is all they had time to grab for change. And the police found the person. They knew it was him because no one has that much change. And so they had him, right? Now what do you do? And I had people like they wanted this guy to be arrested and thrown in, all this stuff. And I'm saying for $1.34. I mean, it just seems like. But why do you feel so out of joint? When they came to our house, they took our 8-track player. Okay, an 8-track player used to play songs. It was kind of a big thing with the tape on it, and it didn't work at the time. It would go like we'd hit track 1, and then it wouldn't work for tracks 2 and 3 and something. The thing is not the thing they thought. If somebody knocked on my door and said, "Can we have the 8-track player?" I'd be like, "Here you go." It doesn't work. If somebody knocks at my door and says, "Can I have 83 cents?" I'm going to find 83 cents. The thing that makes us so upset is that someone violated our space. That they didn't tell us they were coming. And they showed up unannounced and just did what they were doing, and all we have was the trace. God comes like the thief in the night. That's the good news. That's the good news. Is God comes unannounced. God comes in those moments when we're not paying attention. And usually, we only find out about it afterward. Because we see traces where God left off. On Wednesday, it was after Thanksgiving service. It was like 2 in the morning. The window was all lit up. So I'm like, what is that? Why is this lit up? I thought I was on like reliving National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation story where the house is all. And I go out to the window and I see 2 police cars with the bar, all the bar lit up bright white. And they're all facing the parsonage. And I'm like, right. Hi. This is really indelicate. I'm like, well, this is no good. This is no good. So they're here facing this way. And then the cars pass each other and go down. So the guy's going down the wrong way on this side and coming down this way towards the schoolyard. Bright lights. Now I'm wide awake. And I'm looking out the window. I got the cat in there with me looking out too. He's interested in what's going on. And they go back and they look in the field back here and they can see. Now, I didn't know what was happening. I thought, well, maybe this will get the church on the news. Is that? No, I don't think that's a good thing. It's 2 in the morning. Nothing good happens after midnight, so we're in trouble. So I didn't, they're looking for somebody. That's what I figured. They're looking for somebody. So I go back to sleep. And on Friday, Mr. Jenkins told me what happened. He said somebody was driving around back there and ran into a pole and knocked it over. And so it was sparking and the whole thing. Now, I didn't see any of that. I didn't see the guy hit the pole. I didn't see the pole go over. I didn't see the sparks fly. I saw the police cars. I saw 2 a.m. I knew I could put in my head something was going on. To me, it provides an interesting kind of metaphor for what happens when God shows up. Because you and I sometimes are left at the window looking. We know something happened. We're not quite sure what. We see lights and we see them illuminating something, but we don't know exactly what happened. We don't know why the police cars are there in the first place. Then we hear tales. This is what happened. And we start to put the narrative together. And all of a sudden we realize we missed it. There was something that happened. This is the way Jesus comes to us. Even in the Bible, we have that we have the narrative, right? But as often as we get tempted to nail Jesus into the Bible itself, he comes to us in unexpected ways, in ways that are unannounced to everybody else. Jesus comes to us like that thief in the night. And that's the point that Jesus makes in Matthew 24. But the church, and lots of preachers that they're probably a lot better than I am actually, but they're preachers out there, right? And they want to tell you that this is how it works. They want to give you here's how you conjure Jesus. Say these words. Repeat this prayer. Make sure you do this. Oh, and if you're doing that, forget it. He's never showing up. If you do that, never do it. What I want to say is, not so fast. Because every time I'm tempted to draw a little map for where Jesus is showing up, I realize he always takes the back door. And he takes the back door and he comes in unannounced in our lives too. You ever have people show up at your house unannounced? Who's the last person to show up at your house without telling you? Who? Ryan. My Ryan showed up at your... Oh, your Ryan showed up at your house unannounced? Did he fix the cable? I'm just kidding. Who else? Did anybody show up unannounced at your house?
Joe, I showed up at your house.
That's good. Anyone else? Billy always does? But do you know when he's going to show up, or he just shows up? That's good. Ernie, who showed up at your place? Okay. Yeah. Did I smell leftovers? Is it lunchtime? Oh, how about that? Lunchtime. Now we have those who show up unannounced that we don't know, and they show up in a car that we don't recognize, and they see in the driveway all 16 cars in the driveway all on. And we hide. We'll pretend we're not here. We're not here. The cars are all running. They're like, somebody's got to be here. And then we miss it. We miss the knock on the door. We don't answer the phone. We try to screen our call, but Jesus doesn't leave a message. We try to figure out with the static and the noise what's real and what's not, and sometimes we make the wrong decision. Jesus comes unannounced. And you know what occurred to me is that it's the same way on Easter as it is in the Nativity. We have the stories, you see. We have the stories about how Jesus comes, and even in the empty tomb, when Mary is in the cemetery, she's standing there and doesn't know where they put the body. And she's looking and she's distraught. And Jesus himself shows up. Now, I don't know about you, but this has to be the most surprising thing in all of human history. Because the last thing you expect to find when you're at a cemetery is the person that you just laid to rest. Up and around. Now, if you feel like that might not be accurate, I would invite you to come with me to Cedar Grove about 11 o'clock tonight, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see if we can find some photos. No, thank you. So when I was young, we had to go to school. I know, it's amazing, right? We had to go to school. Going to school. And there was it's crazy, right? Schools for chumps. Anyway, we were going to school, and there was a shortcut. That kicks. There's no cushion anymore to soften the blow. So this shortcut required us, we could go down our street, Parkside, and then we cut up another street, because everything's a hill in Pittsburgh. Everything is a hill. So you have to go up the hill, and then there was a cemetery there. Now we knew that if we ran across Scott Road, which was very difficult to do because cars always sped through that spot. But if we ran across and we cut through the hole in the fence, we could save like a mile and a half, like 20 minutes off our walk. Now what would you do?
Somebody else had the
There's no unanimity here. I thought it was a pretty clear-cut question and response. What would you do? I'd take the shortcut, right? I cut through the cemetery. I cut through the cemetery every time. And my dad didn't want me. I have no idea why, to this day, he had such a problem with this. But I would go through and find him. So one day he brings his car. Because he knows that he thinks I'm going through. So he's trying to find me. He doesn't find me. He's sitting right at the end of the, you know how parents do this annoying thing? Like they didn't have anything better to do. Dad, I'm going to go to school. Don't worry about it. Just go on with your day. Go on with your day. There he's sitting in his car as I come out of the cemetery. That was a surprise. But can you imagine Mary in the cemetery? Wait, and here comes Jesus, and she doesn't recognize him at all. She doesn't recognize him. Jesus shows up that way. Let me tell you, the last thing I expect to see in a cemetery is somebody that I just put in there. That's the last thing I expect. Obviously, this has to surprise Mary in John 20. And then the other day when we were setting some things up for Christmas, the decorations, we couldn't find the baby Jesus. I was nervous, you know. We had to apologize to the Lord for misplacing him somewhere. I'm sorry, Jesus, I don't know where you went. So, Jack and I were, sorry I said your name, I was going to leave your nameless. But we were like, did he get caught in one of the reeds? Like, we're looking at all the greenery. And the whole time I'm like, sorry, Jesus, you're treating me so badly. Did you caught in the reeds? And then Jack goes, wait, he's right here. He flips the thing around, and there's the baby Jesus, right where he's supposed to be, right in the middle of the manger. And friends, if that also isn't an expression of how you and I do our relationship with God, I don't know what is. We forever misplacing Him. We can't remember the last time we had Him. And Jesus is there the whole time, unannounced, hidden. That was perfect. We turn him over and get him all set up. This is the way Jesus is with us. Here's the miracle of it all. We don't answer the door. We don't answer the phone. We ignore. We say that's got to be static. I'm in the wrong spot. That's not the real Jesus knocking. I don't know who it is. I get angry. I don't want to see Jesus for a little while. We get all these things. And you know what's amazing? He keeps coming. That's what's amazing. Even with our doubt, even things that grieve our hearts, we get angry at God. We get upset. And He looks at us and goes, I don't want to stay out. I'm just going to keep on coming. And at some point, you're going to answer that door. The Apostle Paul says that the time has come when the alarm clocks are going off. He says, now is the day. We live in the day. And with that alarm comes this invitation to stay alert. Maybe we decided that we knew better than the mystery of God's grace, that we had it all programmed. We live in an enlightened world, after all, and there's no room for mystery anymore. It's all out there. If you said that complained about Noah's flood, you'd be like, just watch the Weather Channel, dude. There's nothing going to come that you don't expect. And then Jesus comes at that very moment, and we're not ready for it. This is the way of God. It's the deep mystery of God's presence coming after us, moment by moment. The experience we have is impossible to foretell, because it's new every morning. We see traces of the Lord. We don't see the pole go over, but we can put the story together and start to imagine in our own lives where where God was at what particular time. Sometimes we're fortunate, maybe a handful, maybe 3, maybe just once. We're fortunate enough to sense God's presence at the intersection when our lives intersect with God's presence. That is an incredible thing. But more often than not, we see traces. We see vestiges. You may not be able to see all of Jesus' footprints, but you know that after he leaves, things are always redeemed when he leaves. And so maybe we didn't see it, but boy, we sure know what it looks like when we see the results. The trace of the Lord, there are times, there are seasons, and the mystery of God's arrival in our lives comes with unexpected ways. Maybe somebody gave us a phone call, encouraged us, told us they were praying for us. Maybe at just that right time, the presence of God swoops in. Maybe someone comes with an unexpected blessing. There are times when I can't see him standing there, but we become keenly aware that there is a specter of God's grace and presence that lingers in the atmosphere. The trace of the Lord lingers over the expression of kindness and compassion and remains its own signal to the goodness of God and faithfulness of God. We cannot explain the inexplicable. We cannot make the manger scene into a dramatic TV series. It doesn't function that way. Every time we peer into the manger scene, the vestige of the baby remains there, but like the empty tomb, we're not going to find the babe in the manger anymore. We find the body in the grave clothes. This week, we're setting up, and we're reminded about how elusive baby Jesus can be. Isn't that perfect? Because God functions in that just the same way for us. We may find the eternally processing, the forever unannounced Jesus. Where is it? We find it with the outlaws and the bandits, where grace can be handed out. We find it in the hospitals and rehab centers where healing can be practiced. We find it in the broken pieces of our world, because it's in these broken places where the presence of God splits our world and brings the patterns of new life and redemption completely at odds with our world. So, let the alarm clock go on. Be ready to answer the door. Look for the specters of his presence. Don't be so hasty to move past him or to move around him. Instead, linger and walk a while by the charcoal fire, by the shoreline, and view the fishermen struggling with their nets. Look past the crowd and find it, not in the doctrinal statements, but maybe in the song of faith. Watch for Jesus. He's coming to us. Watch around the bends and over the horizon lines. Look through the haze and find where he last was. Look for him in the shadowy places, for he will just have left. And when he leaves, everything is always better. And this turns our darkness to the light of the noonday sun. And so I hope that this will be our prayer today as we walk in the day and expect his arrival. For he will come. And that is the good news.